Say something about it. So long. I didn't know it. What do we do? What do you want to do? Was he the one that resigned? No, that was somebody else. Carol worked over at college and taught school for years. I didn't know he was Boydell's best friend. Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Burke County Board of Commissioners pre-agenda meeting for Tuesday, July the 3rd, 2018. Let me ask you to turn off any mobile devices or turn them to silent mode so that we'll not be interrupted with ringing and those kinds of things. And ask you to come to the head of the table today if you have a presentation, and be sure to turn on the microphone so we can hear you and so that others on the internet can hear as well. All the commissioners are present with the exception of Commissioner Taylor. Have not heard from him this afternoon, so perhaps he will arrive late. County manager, attorney, and clerk is present. All right, gentlemen, with that, you've had the agenda prior to our meeting, had an opportunity to look at it. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Scott. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That's all of us, Madam Clerk. Have no special presentations today. That'll bring us on to scheduled public hearings, and we have several to consider. First matter will be Community Development Zoning Amendment ZMA 2018-02 and public hearing. This will be presented by Scott Carpenter, our Deputy County Manager and Planning Director. I saw Scott. There's Scott. Good to see you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, board members, it's a pleasure. It seems like it's been a while since
Turn your microphone on. There you go.
the hot button, the hot seat. So it's a pleasure to be here. This is a zoning request from Todd Binnick and Carissa Parker to rezone 8 parcels of land that total 21 acres, and they are off of Roy McGalliard Avenue. Roy McGalliard Avenue is considered a local road, and the parcels are served by private well and septic systems. I don't know if any of you have been out that way, but this is also the land adjacent to Todd Binnick, which he had requested earlier to rezone based on the motorcycle activity, and he was going to get a conditional use for that. So it's adjacent to those properties. Two of the parcels within the rezoning application have structures on them. Their Carissa Parker parcel has a modular home on it, and the other parcel has a manufactured Class A home on it. The home was set up in violation of the zoning permit. The zoning permit was for the placement of a modular home, and this is the basis for this rezoning request. The R3 zoning district would permit the Class A manufactured home to remain on the property, and the remaining parcels are vacant and wooded or used for agriculture. There's a mix of land uses in the area, but you have am I doing that? There's a mix of land uses in the area, and you have an existing land use map that shows agriculture is to the north of these. There's a couple of single family homes that are north and to the east of the requested parcels. And one of these at the end of Roy McGalliard Road to the south is actually a double wide, not a single wide mobile home. I mean single family unit. It's actually a double wide mobile home. All right. We also have an aerial land use map, and if you look at that map, you can see that the area in general is largely vacant, or it's agriculture, or it has scattered homes. And the types of homes are single wide mobile homes, double wides, or just single family residential. There's no multifamily or anything like that in the area. The current zoning map, which you also have a copy of, which is important, I think, to the discussion, shows that this is currently R1 zoning, and the land directly to the east is R1. All of the land to the south is R3, and across the tracks it is Conservation District Estate. So this being the case, whenever something's adjacent to an existing land use, that zoning, that's the one that is normally requested. So that's why it's an R3 zoning, even though it's a Class A double-wide mobile home. This is in conformity with the comprehensive plan as well as the Blueprint Burke Strategic Land Use Plan. The current zoning district for this area would permit certain residential uses. However, the current zoning would not permit any type of manufactured housing. So that's why Mr. Bennett has requested this rezoning. The proposed zoning district R3 would expand the allowance for both residential and commercial uses, including Class A as well as Class B manufactured homes. Class A manufactured homes are double-wide homes with vinyl siding and pitched roofs with shingles. Class B manufactured homes are single-wide homes with vinyl siding and pitched roofs with shingles. The R3 district does permit manufactured home parks as a conditional use. The Planning Board did meet on May 24th, 2018. We did have public comments, and after a short deliberation, a motion was made to recommend approval of the rezoning request, and the motion was seconded. But based on the vote was 2-2, and so the motion essentially failed. And I'll point out that we probably should have had a reconsideration by the Planning Board, and they should have tried to vote again in order to come up with a 3-1 to see if anybody might change that vote, but that didn't happen, and the chairman moved on. So a few comments from staff on this. Though the area was included in the Lake James planning area, the parcels involved in the rezoning are approximately 1¼ miles as the crow flies from Lake James. Between the lake and the subject parcels are hundreds of acres of conservation district zoning, which provides certain environmental as well as residential use protections. There are 2 site-built single-family dwellings, 1 modular home, and 3 manufactured homes on Roy McGalliard Avenue. The number of manufactured homes on the street and within the area dramatically outweigh single-family homes. Considering the need for affordable housing in the county, staff does not think it reasonable that this area should limit housing choices by excluding manufactured homes entirely. If you drive around the area, it very much resembles our areas that are RMU, you know, rural, out there, agricultural type of districts. Another option for the board to consider would be to rezone the parcels to the residential R2 district. The R2 district is a more restrictive district than the R3 district, and it would limit the manufactured homes to only Class A double wides. Those are the ones with shingled roofs, vinyl siding, and pitched roofs. The R2 district would also not permit the mobile home parks. So the staff recommendation is that we find the proposed rezoning request to be consistent with the adopted land use plan and recommends approval of the proposed rezoning as requested, or to approve the rezoning parcels to the more restrictive R2 district. That being said, there were several pictures in your packet that show housing in the vicinity as well as on the Roy McGalliard Road. The county attorney has also weighed in on this, and he has offered 3 options that the board might consider. The first option is to vote on the R3 zoning designation as originally petition by the applicants and to adopt a consistency statement. The second is to deny the applicant's rezoning request for the R3 zoning designation and identify the reasons for denial. Number 3 is refer the rezoning petition back to the planning board for consideration of the R2 zoning designation as proposed by the planning department and community development staff. And the county manager's recommendation is option number 3, which would send it back for reconsideration to the planning board members. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Gentlemen, any questions for Scott on this matter?
Mr. Chairman, just a couple question for you, Scott, on this. Besides the mobile home, obviously, when you look at the R2 versus R3, it looks like the R3 does give you quite a few conditional use or use by rights besides those. So it kind of opens us up as far as that goes. So there's a lot more control we have in the R2 situation.
That's right.
So to me, I'm comfortable doing the R2 personally, but the R3, I would like to see continue some restrictions on some of those other uses.
And the other thing for me to point out is between the R1 and the R3, R2 is a transitional zone. So it allows for a lesser impact as you're transitioning into another type of zone that allows more uses.
Scott, where are we with his motocross going on out there?
I've not heard anything about it in several months, really.
Nobody's complained or anything, and
No, sir.
and there's nothing. I didn't go out there, but I've been out there before. But I mean, there's no way he could somehow turn this into more motocross if he wanted to, or
No, sir.
Okay, all right.
It's not related to it at all. It's on the other side of the tracks from where the motocross activity took place.
Yes, sir.
Scott, a couple of quick questions. You stated in your material that you don't believe it'd have any impact whatsoever up or down on other people's property
I don't believe
to
so.
rezone that.
Right.
And you also stated in your material that the reason this applicant is making this request, that he is out of compliance with the zoning ordinance as it is now. And I assume the mobile home, single mobile home that you included in your pictures is the one that we're addressing?
One of them is, yes, it's a vinyl sided, but it looks very similar to a modular unit. The only reason we knew is we investigated it, the double wide, after a citizen called and asked if it was indeed a double wide or a modular unit.
How long has he been in violation of the ordinance? How long has that home been there?
I don't remember the exact date, but it was being put in at the same time as he was applying for this rezoning. So he had applied for a permit to bring it in, and then somebody called as it was being put in. Then we went out and we checked it and told him that it couldn't stay unless it was rezoned to allow for the Class A mobile home, that it was not a modular, it was a Class A unit. And so then it went to the planning board.
It wasn't a used one that was not supposed to be moved, that was moved anyway?
No, sir. It's a legal one, new.
Okay. If we send this back to the committee, the timetable to take another look and bring it back to the board?
I'm sorry, sir. What's the?
If we do item number 3, suggested motion,
Right.
which was to send it back to your committee, what would be the timetable to take another look and bring it back to the board?
Well, if we were able to take it back this month to the planning board, which I don't believe we can because the county attorney says we need to make the official decision at the regularly scheduled meeting to send it back to the planning board. They could have made it this month if we could make that decision today. So it would be August that it would go to planning board, and then we would try to get it to you all by September.
So to kind of paraphrase, your recommendation would be to override your board and for us to approve it. Is that correct?
You could choose to do that, or we could send it back to the board for reconsideration. So I'm fine either way.
That's all I have.
And the board, the way that I see it, never really made a recommendation. It was a failed recommendation. There weren't 3-1 on the vote, so it was just a failed motion.
2-2, wasn't it?
2-2.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions to Scott? Mr. Counselor, are you saying then that we cannot act on this today by sending it back? It would need to be acted on in the regular meeting?
Yeah, that's right.
What if I don't see the option here?
The hot spot.
Would it be appropriate for this board to, during that action, if the board so choose to accept the R2 recommendation? Could that be would it still need to go back to the planning board is my question.
The citizen has not asked for an R2. He's asked for an R3. So this should come before the board at our meeting for an up or down vote on changing his zoning from R1 to R3. If the board wants to change it to R2, there will not have been notice of that given either either to the citizen or to the surrounding citizens who may have an interest and for whom the most appropriate forum to express their opinions would be before the planning board instead of before this board. So my recommendation would be is that since since there won't be a notice of the hearing and of a vote to change it to R2, then we need to either approve it as R3 or don't approve it, and we can then send it back to the planning board for their reconsideration as R2, if that's something that the citizen's interested in.
You buy into that, okay, Mr. Carpenter? That seemed to work with the process over there?
That seems fine.
Any other questions on this matter? Hearing none, it will remain on the agenda without objection. Thanks, Scott. Item number 2, Community Development Flood Damage Prevention Ordinance Text Amendment FTA 2018-01, and public hearing, again presented by Mr. Carpenter.
Thank you, sir. This is, pardon me, the Burke County Flood Damage Protection Ordinance was enacted in 1991, and the most recent amendment to that ordinance was September 5th, 2007. Article 4, Section A of the ordinance designates the building inspector as the floodplain administrator for Burke County. However, recently, the senior planner has started taking over those duties as the floodplain administrator, and this request is a simple text amendment to propose that be changed to the community development director or their designee as the floodplain administrator. So the reason for this request is when somebody comes in to ask for permits, the first people they see are the clerks and the planners, and that's where this should be called. So if it's in a floodplain, we should be checking that before we issue any zoning permits or any building permits. The way that it was working is if the chief building inspector had to do the approval, he was out in the field, and sometimes these might slip through. So we've made a change to where the senior planner signs off on these. And he's also a certified floodplain manager.
Thank you, Scott. Any questions for Scott on this item? Hearing none, it will remain on the agenda without objection. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, sir.
Item number 3 comes from the clerk, ordinance adopting a new code of ordinances and public hearing. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a request to adopt an ordinance after a public hearing. We have worked to update the county's code of ordinance. The ordinances were adopted in 1993 and republished in 2008. The code has been legally reviewed and updated as needed. We've included session laws, ordinances the board has adopted and been legally reviewed. So going forward, we will codify new ordinances that go into the code as needed. And with me by speakerphone is Dan Walker. He's an attorney with MediCode. He's been helping us with this project, and he's available to address any questions you may have. But it was just time that we update our code, and each of you will get one of these big black binders once we adopt the ordinance approving the code. Dan or I will be happy to answer any questions you may have about it.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Dan, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you barely, but yes, I can. Good afternoon.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you for being with us. I'll open the floor for questions. Any questions for the clerk or for Mr. Walker on this item?
Mr. Chairman, just what are the major changes that we're looking at to make it this code? Is there a list of those highlighted area? What is?
Session laws, ordinances the board adopted since 2008 were included, and basically any laws that changed during this time frame, since it's been so long, that they updated those as well. You can have you have a copy of the text in your SharePoint folder, and I can provide you with a paper copy if you would like to see the code. Dan, would you care to add anything to that?
Sure, just a little bit. Actually, for this new code, we generally stayed with the same code structure and chapter numbering scheme as much as reasonably possible. Of course, when we worked in new ordinances, there was some new numbering to be done. Between the table of contents, the comprehensive index, you should be able to find just about anything you need pretty quickly. Primarily, we took out deadwood cluttering the old code, such as the old privilege licensing provisions, which the legislature repealed several years ago. We updated language to reflect statutory changes, such as the definition of state of emergency. And now, the state wants local governments to say they're using declarations instead of proclamations. We made that change. Due to court decisions, in your noise regulations, we took out the word unnecessary because, well, quite a few courts have focused on that word, so we thought, take it out, and it was struck through and talked about throughout the process over these last few years. That is not something we just did willy-nilly on our own. Your new animal control provisions are inserted. The old ones removed. We added some new informational state law references throughout the code, took out the obsolete ones. That's just kind of a general idea of what was done. No policy changes whatsoever were inserted. That's what y'all do, not the codifier. So feel free to fire away with any questions.
All right, thank you, Dan and Kay. Any questions for either of these? All right, hearing none, this item will remain on the agenda without objection. Dan, thank you for being on standby for us. Thank you for your input.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This brings us to item 5, consent agenda items. First item on the consent agenda is the Board of Commissioners' designation of voting delegate for the NCACC Annual Conference. This is in Hickory in August. I'll entertain any ideas. I think most of us perhaps are planning to attend. I know Johnny, myself, Scott, Maynard, y'all planning to attend. Wayne. I'll be happy to be the designee, or if someone else just has a grand desire for that, speak now for every
Mr. Chairman, it's not a rule, but our usual procedure was if the chair is going, they fulfill that position. If not, it falls to the vice chair. If neither is going, then we choose one.
Okay. Well, that's good with me. I plan to be there. Everybody okay with that?
Sure.
I am.
All right, thank you, Maynard. We'll leave that on the agenda as is, and I will plan to be our designee. Item number 2, BDI, approval of BDI bylaws. This will be presented by Alan Wood. Alan, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Cut your microphone on there, please.
Good afternoon. This is a change that's precipitated by the Committee of 100 being decommissioned and being replaced by the Thrive 22 group. What we'll do is we're just switching seats out. There were 4 seats before that were designated to the committee. There will be 4 seats afterwards that will be filled by the Thrive participants. The Thrive participants are the folks that participated in our capital campaign. Per the bylaws, the way we'll write them is we'll start with the founders level, which are the largest funders. They would be contacted first to fill those seats, and then it would drop down to the platinum level. And then if I didn't fill the 4 seats at that level, I'd drop down to gold. So there are 2 founders level supporters. Then there are 4 platinum level, and I think I'll fill the 4 seats out of those 2 slots. And so this was presented to the board. They reviewed them from May until June and then approved those changes at our June board meeting to pass on to the supporting municipalities for their approvals.
All right, thank you, Alan. Gentlemen, any questions for Alan on this item?
Mr. Chairman, just kind of paraphrase, as I understand, no major correction, just updates, language, little language improvement, et cetera, et cetera.
That's correct.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Maynard. Yes, sir.
Number of positions, voting positions the county will have?
The county has 3. Yeah, the manager, the chair or his designee, and then 1 at large.
Other questions? The Thrive campaign has been very successful. I think we could say that, Alan, and let me congratulate you and the efforts of that group, how well that has gone.
Thank you.
Other comments? All right, thank you, Alan. This item will remain on the consent agenda without objection. Item number 3 comes from the clerk, appointments to the Council on Aging. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Seats 3 and 4 on the Council on Aging are vacant, as well as seats 9, 12, and 13. Applications from Ann Gibson and Patsy Frady were received to fill some of these vacancies. So we're requesting to appoint Ann Gibson to seat number 3 to complete an unexpired term ending November 30th, 2020, and to appoint Patsy Frady to seat number 4 to complete an unexpired term ending November 30th, 2019.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Any questions on this matter?
Does that feel that more than
No.
that? Yeah, I see something there.
Okay, hearing no other questions, without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Item number 4, again presented by the clerk, reappointments to the Burke County Smartstart. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a request to reappoint Tracy Kincaid, the DSS designee, and Rebecca McLeod, our health director, to the Burke County Smartstart, which is Burke Partnership for Children, Board of Directors for 3-year terms ending June 30th, 2021, and to prove an exemption to the county's residency requirement for Ms. McLeod.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Any questions on this item? Hearing none, without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Item number 5 comes from the County Manager, appointment of Margaret M. Pierce as Deputy County Manager, Finance Director. Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is more of a formality just for the board to officially appoint her as the Finance Director. So unless there's any questions you'd like of Margaret, pretty much routine.
All right, thank you, Brian. You want to, Margaret, have any say at all?
Yes,
anything?
sir. I'm happy to be here.
Well, we're glad to see you today, and welcome to Burke County.
Thank you.
Any questions, gentlemen? All right, hearing none, without objection, this item will remain on the agenda. Item number 6, again, County Manager, request for additional deputy in the town of Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I think it was a week or two ago, we got a request from the town of Hildebrand stating they would like to have an additional deputy under pretty much the same protocol and requirements that we have for the current deputy. I believe the county council is working on the documents for that and would have that available for the board in the agenda packet for the actual meeting.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions on this matter? Brian, have we reviewed our costs to be sure all of our costs are covered?
As far as I know, yes, but I will go back and check and make sure with Paul that we are covering all the costs. That should be pretty much a given, but I'll double check it for you.
All right, thank you. All
Mr.
right.
Chairman, post question, Brian, did they allude to any more reasoning than that, than just one? I just wondered, they had another death down there last night, or night before last. You know, they've had 2 in just a few weeks, and just wondered if that had an impact on it.
As far as I know, it's just what was in the letter. I got an email from Tom Drum, their town manager, and was asking about the possibility of doing that. They're also asking about the possibility of us doing some other services, I think, with planning and zoning. So
Good.
Do those, you may not be able to answer this, Brian, maybe the sheriff, I see he's in the audience. What hours do those folks work down there, Sheriff? Do you mind?
I think the reason that they are wanting another deputy is so they can utilize them at the hours they want. On those community police, what we do is allow them to determine when they want to use those deputies. They've been talking about this for several years, and just so they'll have coverage, more coverage than they have. Obviously, we cover 24/7, but they would like to have additional deputies to cover at the particular times they want to. So we usually leave that up to them on when they want the deputy to work. And it's a win-win for us because obviously if their deputy's working, then we don't have to use our existing deputies to answer those calls. And so it's a good thing. It's a win-win, I think, for the citizens.
So do you anticipate that deputy might work more night hours, or maybe they work night hours now?
Yeah, and what they'll do when they're having special events, they'll have the current deputy now working those special events. And if they're having particular problems during a weekend or night, then they'll assign that deputy to work those time periods. But primarily the deputy that's currently working works during the day. So in the past, they'd mentioned they would like to have a deputy at night. So I would imagine one of these deputies will be working more at night than the current deputy is.
All right. Thanks, Steve.
Mr. Chairman, I had heard that they are planning to reopen a swimming pool and some of that stuff, and was needing some more security for some of that stuff. So I have an idea all of that together has prompted the decision to ask for another one.
Thanks, Sheriff. Any other questions? All right, with hearing no other questions, without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Item number 7, Finance, approval of authorized signers for county bank accounts. This will be presented by Paul Lyons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, this one and the next one, if the board doesn't mind me talking about both of them at the same time, are more or less sort of the, for lack of a better term, housekeeping items. With Margaret coming in as the finance officer, the board will need to remove myself from any authority on any of the bank accounts and substitute Margaret for me. And also as a debt set-off officer, we'll need to designate Margaret as the debt set-off officer instead of myself. So just routine, things like that.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Any question on this matter? All right, hearing none, without objection, both items 7 and 8 will remain on the consent agenda. Item number 9 comes from our Health Department, Child Protective Child Fatality Teams, fiscal year 17-18 report. Rebecca McLeod. Afternoon, Rebecca.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Adam. Thank y'all for allowing me to come before you, as I normally do once a year. Due to North Carolina General Statute 7B-1406, as chair of the Child Fatality Task Force of the county, get to come and present to you our 17-18 annual report. The state likes us to do it calendar year, but I do it fiscal year. So I have already presented it to the Board of Health at their last meeting. And this report is one just so you know that as a community group who are looking at the child deaths throughout the year, we also not just look at the child's death, we look at systems changes. What could we have done differently? Or what are things that could be done to help prevent others in the future? And this year we have one systems recommendation that we are working on currently and are going to continue to work on, and that's working on adverse childhood experiences, because we have so many families who are in trauma, who are in crisis, and when events happen, a lot of it has to do with what has happened in their childhood for the adults. So we're trying to train providers, daycare operators, families, to teach them how to tell when kids are having trauma and the symptoms of it. So we've put together a plan and we're giving out information. We're going to be providing training this fall and next spring for providers here in the county. It'll be open if you'd like to come. Love to have you. So that's one big systems change that we're doing for this coming year. So I just wanted to see if y'all have any questions. I can't tell you any specifics about any deaths. That's not allowed by law. And what they do is they look at how could we prevent anything in the future. And we're finding more and more of our families with substance abuse issues and other issues, and a lot of that stems back from their own childhood and traumas that they had. So we're trying to break that cycle, but it's going to take a while. So I don't know if you have any questions.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. Any questions, gentlemen, on this matter? Hearing none, without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thanks very much.
Item number 10, Tax Department. It's presented by our Tax Administrator, Danny Eisenhower. Release refund report. Afternoon, Danny.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Release refund report. We've had, the report shows $479.52. We had $315.84 rebilled, which gives us a net release of $163.68. We also had refunds in the amount of $513.16, and the vehicle tax, we had no refunds that had to be approved.
Hey, thank you, Danny. Any questions on this report?
Mr. Chairman, Denny, this ends the year, so this is more or less how it's going to be. Is that correct? We're going to fall a little short. For the taxes, you're 271,000 short. You're a little bit over on late list penalties, and you're over on property tax.
That's correct. On the tax collection report, we ended the year at 99.39% of budget. The delinquent taxes, we were at 83.61, so you can see we're about $116,000 shy there. And excuse me, late list penalties, we were a little bit over there at 104.12%. This is where we're ending the year at for this year. I will present a settlement report next month that'll have this a little bit more in detail.
Correct.
All right, thank you, Danny. Any questions for Danny on item 10 or 11, the tax collection report? All right, Danny, on item 12, tax collection bank attachment for delinquent taxes.
As you've read probably in the agenda abstract here, the collector is charged annually with the duty of collecting current and delinquent taxes. General statute gives us the ability to use whatever lawful means to collect these taxes. And it pretty much spells out within the general statutes what we can use. One of the methods that we use very little is bank attachments. And the reason that we don't use it is prior boards really have not supported us in doing that. So I'm coming to you guys for that support. The bank attachments, as you can imagine, whenever you start attaching somebody's bank account, that gets their attention real bad. A lot of times they'll make phone calls, and so that's the reason I want you guys to be on board with this. Along with whenever we do a bank attachment and somebody has, when we do a bank attachment and we take somebody's money, then chances are they've got other checks that they're paying, other bills that are going to bounce, so they're going to incur other fees and penalties. So, like I said, and on in here, just so that you have a background of what we do to collect taxes, we send notices every July. The notices for 2018 are going to go out July the 11th. We send delinquent notices in January. We advertise the real property in the newspaper. And we also send notices warning of these collection remedies. Once the taxes become delinquent in January, we use wage garnishment to the taxpayer, their payroll. Like I say, we use very limited bank attachment. What we have used has been on businesses. We also do debt set-off, and you just assign Margaret, or Margaret will be our new debt set-off officer, replacing Paul there. And then we also, something new that we started this year, we attach the proceeds of property when it sells. So we did have one that we collected, I believe, about $17,000 on in delinquent taxes. But, and then the board, a prior board, did the deed certification, which has worked really well in our tax collections. You can't record a deed with delinquent taxes on it without the taxes being paid first. And of course we use mortgage style and foreclosure with the county attorney. But anyway, bottom line is here, I'd like to be able to use bank attachment or bank garnishment, and I'm hoping to have the support of the board.
All right, thank you, Danny. Gentlemen, you've heard this information. Any questions for Danny on this item? Danny, when an attachment is about to happen, I presume the person would get proper notice and told that was going to take place?
Sir.
Here, let me add something to that. Before we do a bank attachment, we will send what we call a tax seizure warning, which they'll print out a duplicate receipt, and we have a stamp, and they red stamp it, and they give them 10 days to pay it. And of course, we generally wait at least 2 weeks before we actually proceed with it. But they do get another chance, besides all the other stuff Danny went over.
Yeah. And anybody that doesn't know, this is Dawn, my deputy collection supervisor.
Any other concern, question about this item? All right. Without objection, this item will remain on the agenda. Thank you very much, Dawn.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Item 6, items for decision. I have none today. I have no reports scheduled for today. Other discussion items. I have one item on the discussion agenda. It's the Veterans Monument. Gentlemen, we've had several requests during the public comment concerning a Veterans Memorial, and I was hopeful that some of those folks would be here for this open discussion today. Don't believe I see anybody in the room. That's okay. We'll continue the discussion. I asked the clerk to kind of memorialize our information from these requesters. And so you've had some of that in your package, and I want to just point out a couple items that of note along the way that as I reviewed all the things that we've heard and requests that we've heard. This kind of began in November of 2017 with the request from Mr. Jack Carroll requesting a monument a group that he was working with, veterans from Burke County, who would like to memorialize those who lost their lives in wars, in different wars. And the request came with, at that time, no request for funds, but a whole number of possibilities in terms of what a monument might look like, and specifically the request was to place such a monument on the old courthouse square. And so following that request, myself and the vice chair met with Mr. Carroll on December the 8th, tried to entertain all of his suggestions and try to discern exactly what it was he was trying to do with this group and with this memorial. And so following that, I spoke with each of you, the commissioners, individually, explaining our discussions with Mr. Carroll, what he was asking for, and tried to discern your feelings about it as well. And I then relayed that back to Mr. Carroll via email in January, on January 23rd, as a matter of fact. And at that time advised him via that written correspondence that this board generally supported the idea. However, the old courthouse square was a leased property and a long-term lease with the city of Morganton, and that generally we did not feel we had the right just to designate property on that square without the city of Morganton being in concurrence with it. So we suggested he take his request to them, and also made the suggestion that he might consider other locations, potentially the History Museum as one of those locations. Then February 20th, again, we had a citizen addressing the board, Jack Carroll, Champ Ray, Dave Turbigen, and Hope Hoyt, again requesting the memorial be placed. Again, the sentiment seemed to be on the old courthouse square. In the meantime, we had some discussions, or I did, and I think most of you may have had some discussions with Councilman of the City of Morganton, and it appears that they have lots of other plans and ideas for that area and are not willing at this time to maybe approve such a thing. So then in March, county manager had contact from Mr. Carroll, indicated he was no longer working on this project, and that Mr. Champ Ray would be heading that project. Then April, county manager had information, Ron Lewis advised him that he would be working on this project. So then on May the 1st, at our PreAgenda meeting, Mr. Champ Ray again came to the group asking for a memorial to be provided. At this point, I was hopeful today we might find out who was really in charge of this project, whether it be Mr. Carroll or Mr. Lewis or Mr. Ray. I regret that there's no one here. I haven't talked with them personally since our last meeting. I did, however, speak with Mayor Thompson to see if the city of Morganton's opinion continued to be the same, and it is. So again, on May the 15th at our meeting, we had Mr. Ray requested the monument. And again, on June 19th at our commission meeting, Mr. Carroll and Ms. McIntosh again requested such a monument. In some of those requests, in the meantime, they have indicated they might also at some point request county funding for such a monument, and also at this point seem to have an interest in perhaps locating the monument at the existing courthouse. I think when Johnny and I met with Mr. Carroll, we had some discussion about that. Of course, there's a World War II memorial there that was placed there by the Sunrise Rotary Club a number of years ago. That's a rather large memorial there in the corner. I'm sure all of you all are familiar with that. So that's kind of where we are with this. We have not been presented with a specific drawing. The latest drawing was different from all the others that Mr. Ray, I think, presented. And we've had that in your package. And I guess at this point, without having any of those folks present to have any open dialogue with, my question to this board might be, how do you all feel about the potential for citing such a thing at the existing courthouse with the, and I've noted this to Mr. Carroll in some of the correspondence I've had with him, that, you know, we don't know the longevity of the existing courthouse. It may be there forever. It may be there only, you know, 5, 10 years. Who knows? We don't know that. So what that might mean to a group that would cite a memorial there if you know, for some reason the courthouse wasn't there in 10 years, 15, 20 years, might be a consideration. I don't know for sure if they ever got an official response from the History Museum. I think they asked about the possibility of placing a memorial there. Some of you may know more about that than I do, but I have not heard an official answer from anyone at the History Museum. So I guess my question to this board today would be, do you wish me to make any further suggestions to this group, whoever might be in charge of it at this point, or do any of you have any more insight into this subject than I do?
I think, Mr. Chairman, I like to see him raise some money personally before they haven't raised a dollar, and I'm all for it. But I think, you know, it comes to a point where you've got to have some money, and you need to have some money there when you come and talk to us, I believe. I mean, and I would prefer to have it on the old courthouse grounds with the other ones. When I say our courthouse.
Existing courthouse.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, liberty to make several comments, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Some of you are aware that we're having a super duper reunion for the Taylors in the eastern part of the county, and they're spending a lot of good money in Burke County this this summer. But a couple of points out of that, we had a little short business meeting, and they had requested from our group some money to put up a cemetery marker for great-great-grandmother. And part of it, and the reason this is prominent at this point, is just from some of the things you're thinking about, some of the hardships placed on the women of Burke County out of that Civil War. The stories have never been told. My great-great-grandmother, whose husband went off to fight the war, did not come back. So did 3 or 4 of her other sisters' husbands who did not come back. On top of that, the carpetbaggers, there's another name for them too, came to her house, and she was in the country, no help. And they had their way with her 4, 5, 6, 7 times. She conceived out of that rape, and her daughter is my great-grandma. And obviously we don't know which one of them is the father of it. Now I tell you that to say, how can we honor inner soldier and not honor all? And I feel like that we have a situation, and it's not our fault, not their fault. It's kind of like that old song. We was looking back to see if you were looking back to see if I was looking back to see. They're waiting on a directive, and you're waiting on a directive, and I thought they had that on their behalf. I thought they had that resolved with a couple of new members and some involvement. I thought they had some some money committed, and I don't know exactly how much, but I'll not mention that. I heard the number, and I can't recall it. There were more people killed out of Burke County for that Civil War than all the other wars combined. Is that correct? Does anybody know that? That's what I heard. There were more Burke County citizens killed during the Civil War than all the wars afterwards out of Burke County. So I'm going to agree with Wayne. I'm not sure what I want to do, but I think it's a mistake for this board not to do anything, because every one of you who have kinsfolks in Burke County, your heritage was impacted by that war, and to a great deal. And the other thing is, you know, I said that one thing that I'd like to do, if I was given the privilege to call somebody back from heaven or wherever, it'd be Abraham Lincoln, and I'd like to kick him real hard in the hiney, because he broke the Constitution with that war. I don't believe in slavery. The Bible says you shouldn't have slavery. As a matter of fact, it says if you buy property and during that exchange you inherit slavery, that you're to release them in 7 years. But the truth of the matter is, they took stuff that did not belong to them and did not compensate the people in who they took it from. And that was the government. Big time. So, I don't want to see it go away on our behalf, if that's the question you're asking. I don't want to build a Taj Mahal. I don't want to build, but I think a memorial is almost necessitated just to be fair to the other people to give fair treatment. It doesn't make any difference which war you gave your life, you still gave your life for that war and for that country. Because it was an inner fight, it's still a death contributed to a war.
Other comments, concerns?
Personally, I have no objection to a memorial. I'm like Wayne. I think it's, you know, a good idea. My concern is, you know, obviously, the city of Morganton and that long-term lease kind of makes the old courthouse square not feasible. So, you know, the existing courthouse, I don't have a problem with it. The only thing that I would ask for is, because we've been given a lot of information, but we haven't been given any exact information. You mentioned we've had several people say they're kind of leading the charge on this, but we're not exactly who it is at this point. And then we have, you know, varying numbers. We've been told we are not going to have to make any contribution to this memorial. Then later on we're told we are going to have to make a contribution to this memorial. So there's a lot of unknowns. And so I have no objection about the memorial. I think it's a great idea. I don't have an objection about it being on the existing courthouse. My only objection is I have to have more information, because I can't make a educated decision unless I get better information. And that better information is exactly what this memorial is going to entail. How big is it going to be? I mean, we've been given a lot of different scenarios here, but I want to know exactly what that scenario is going to look like and what the cost is going to be. And is there any monetary expectation from us? I just need to know that one way or the other. And Wayne mentioned too, you know, a lot of times when folks come to us for money, you know, it's one of those things, well, you know, they're coming to us, but they've not raised any funds, and that kind of throws a red flag up to me. Well, do they expect all the funds from us? And is that fair? So anyway, that's my only objection.
Other comments? I guess my only concern is particularly on funding. You know, I think we always have to consider when folks, whatever the request is, what kind of precedent do we set? If we choose to fund this monument, well, what group next month wants a monument. That's something we'll certainly have to consider. So maybe at this point, would it be appropriate to advise this group, and Mr. Attorney, you tell me if this needs to take some other action other than this, that so far as a location is concerned, if they can provide a suitable design and something that meets the approval of the board, that the existing courthouse is a location that we are willing to consider, would that be, that might get them off square zero, perhaps. What's the consensus? And Mr. Attorney, can we do that just on consensus here and advise the group of that, or do we need some kind of particular action for that?
Well, it depends on if you're trying to commit yourself to offering a spot on the new courthouse grounds for this monument, then I think I would do it as a resolution at your next meeting. If you're just trying to give encouragement, then I think you can do that by just a consensus.
Not knowing the particular design, it's kind of hard to give a defined spot.
But I think, Mr. Chairman, if we tell them that they can go on the new, I think that would help them in their, how they're going to build or what they're going to build or whatever. That might help them a lot in that endeavor.
And of course, if it's on the new courthouse grounds, then the county should be retaining some design approval and things like that, so that the county will have something there that the county's expecting.
Right, okay. All right, we'll work together with perhaps you and the clerk to prepare some kind of correspondence and discern who to send that to.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I would, if you can find out, see if they can designate one person to represent their group to correspond with you on this matter. Because one week you may be talking to Champ, and then the next week you may be talking to Jack. See if they can come up with either one or the other as their spokesperson, so that we can correspond through the one person.
Okay. Other concerns, questions on this matter? All right, we'll proceed in that fashion then on this subject. This brings us to item 9, closed session. We do have a need for a closed session this afternoon. Closed session to discuss threatened or pending litigation, to preserve the attorney-client privilege, to discuss economic development matters, and to discuss personnel matters. So at this time, entertain a motion to go into closed session pursuant to NCGS 143.318, 11A, 3, 4, and 6.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Wayne. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Mr. Chairman, point of question there. This is our pre-agenda. We can't make a decision in today's meeting. Why are we having a closed session?
So that we can discuss matters. There won't be any decision made today. And just before we go, Johnny, you want to share with us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For that personal privilege, I just think that we ought to remember, I think we're all aware that Carol Franklin, Drexel Alderman, passed away this weekend, or this past week, and I just certainly hope that we remember Carol's family as Drexel moves forward to try to find a replacement for Carol. Also, Anthony Starr, our Executive Director of the Western Piedmont Council of Governments, lost his father, Russell Starr. County Manager and I went down to the receiving last evening, so let's, if we can remember Russell, and then a good friend of all of us, Don Smith, who passed away. Remember those families. It's just 3 sudden deaths of really, really fine people. So if we could just remember their families, I would appreciate that.
And also lost this week a lieutenant in our EMS division also. Remember that family as well. Any other comments before we go into closed session? All right, hearing none, we'll take maybe just a couple minutes break before we go into closed session, give you a chance to get a drink of water, take care of any other business, and then go into closed session. No action was taken or a vote for any action. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Wayne. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.